Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Rafael. If you come from Substack, you probably already know me. If you don't come from Substack, well, my name is Rafael. I am the owner and I guess the editor of the Rising Times. Which is my Substack publication, right? And if this is an introduction to my work, welcome. I'll put in the link description and the description. I'll put a link to my Substack so you guys can actually read the article that this is based off. And if you're feeling a little too lazy to read it, well, it's actually a recording of my voice. So you guys can go ahead and check it out. But I thought it'd be really cool if I made a little bit of a podcast, with all the content and data that I'm generating. As I think the rising times can take a really fascinating turn when AI is fully embraced. So this is my first experiment, and I really hope you guys enjoy it.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It is great, truly great to have you with us again here at the Rhizome Times podcast. Our mission, it's always clear. We want to cut through all that noise, that information overload. We sift through some really fascinating sources, and we try to pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights, basically tailor-made for you, our listener. We're really here to give you that shortcut, to being genuinely well-informed, maybe with a few surprising facts, and hopefully just enough humor to keep you engaged on this journey. Today we are diving into something particularly captivating. It's actually one of our own past recordings, an episode from the Rhizome Times podcast, originally just saved as Chicago 2.m4a. But this isn't just, some random audio file. It's really a window into a mind grappling with a pretty profound and honestly quite audacious theory about, well, us, human nature. So get ready. Today we're exploring that deep, almost primal urge to create something new, the act of creation itself. Our journey starts, maybe surprisingly, with some detours into classical opera. Yeah, opera. Then it takes a sharp turn into some really personal experiences. And then maybe controversially, it connects all this to let's say, a very well-known and debated public figure. It connects dots you probably never imagined linking. It's going to be an intellectual ride, that's for sure. Hopefully, it might reshape how you think about your own creative side.
Absolutely. And our mission today, looking back at this recording, is to really unpack that whole intellectual journey the speaker went on. We're going to trace their path, from those initial almost stream of consciousness thoughts right at the beginning, all the way to this singular, really bold and provocative hypothesis about the biological roots of our creative drive. And we're not just summarizing here. We're going to focus on dissecting the underlying mechanisms they're proposing. And crucially, exploring what the implications might be. The implications of such a, fundamental theory for humanity, for progress, maybe even how we see the universe. It's not just about what was said, but why it might really matter to you.
Okay, let's get into this recording then. Chicago, 2.m4a. It kicks off with the speaker's initial thoughts right after waking up, that moment of just existing. They start with this really simple but kind of profound thing. Well, good morning, everybody. We have done it, went to sleep and woke up. Yeah. It sets this reflective, almost philosophical mood right away, a bit of gratitude maybe, just for being conscious. And then it shifts pretty quickly into the more complex stuff, thinking, creating. It's like that basic shift from just being to thinking.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, that shift. And from that quiet moment, they jump straight into this internal debate, like, okay, what am I going to talk about today? And the first idea that pops up, Mozart's Don Giovanni.
Right. And they specifically mention the scene of the Commendator, calling it quite beautiful. They even say they plan to share it. Quote, I'll put a link down at the bottom so you guys can go and listen to it. Which immediately shows that impulse, right? To share something appreciated, even if they end up going in a different direction.
It really is telling. Yeah. Even as a discarded idea, Don Giovanni reveals so much about their interests, their intellectual starting point, opera, right? Highly dramatic, emotional. But that specific scene, the Commendator scene, for anyone maybe not familiar, that's the climax. The statue of the guy Don Giovanni murdered comes alive. Comes to life and drags him down to hell.
Super intense. Yeah,
exactly. It's this moment of profound, terrifying materialization of consequence. Yeah. Judgment takes physical form. A statue moves. It's not just some random beautiful scene. It really foreshadows the themes the speaker gets into later, how the unseen becomes seen, how internal stuff manifests externally, and the inescapable nature of certain forces. It hints at that power of the unseen, making itself very, very real.
That's a brilliant connection. How even the rejected idea holds clues. And then we see this pivot. which is really key, I think, to understanding where they're headed. Even though they say they're passionate about opera, they decide, no, that's not the topic for today. They mention seeing Yuval Sharon. He wrote New Philosophy of Opera, and his lectures, Anarchy at the Opera at U Chicago. It's kind of funny. They admit having strong opinions about Sharon's book. And add this little personal detail. If you look up the lectures, you can actually get to see me ask a question.
Huh. That little detail makes them human, right? But that shift, that pivot is so important. Why move away from something you're passionate about, even debating publicly? They tell us why. They realize they really want to talk about something that I deem a little bit more important.
Right. More important than opera, even.
Yeah. It's not just changing your mind. It feels like this internal pull towards something else, something fundamental. And that sets up the main theme, the act of creating from us, or creation from us, as they put it. They're shifting from analyzing art someone else made to the internal drive behind making anything at all. It signals, okay, this is something deeply personal, maybe universal, an idea that just sort of asserted itself.
And that leads directly to the core concept they land on, necessity. They describe it not as like a gentle nudge, but this undeniable feeling when you're just sitting there and then you feel as if you have to create something, you have to write something, you have to do something. It's not just a thought, it's an imperative. It demands action.
Exactly. Necessity. And then they turn it outwards. They ask you, the listener, I'd like to know if you guys have experienced this, which is powerful, right? Because they're not just talking about wanting to paint or write. They call it an almost feeling of dread that arises from not being able to do this. Dread. Let's just sit with that word.
Dread. Yeah, that's strong.
It is. It suggests that not creating isn't just, oh, well, missed opportunity. It's a negative state, a burden almost. This drive isn't just a preference. It's this almost painful imperative, like pressure building up that needs release.
Makes sense. The discomfort of an idea, just sitting there, needing out.
Precisely. And they connect that dread directly to the desire to see something emerge, something that we have envisioned in our minds. We want to see it emerge. We want to see it materialize. And that's the key concept, materialization. It's not enough to just have the idea. There's this deep, maybe biologically rooted need for that internal vision, that abstract thought, that fantasy really, to take actual form, tangible, audible, visible form in the world. It's about crossing that boundary, thought to thing, invisible to visible. And they argue that drive is just fundamental to us, making our inner worlds outer.
So after asking the listener, what is it that you want to create? The speaker shares their own examples, really vivid ones. These aren't just abstract theories for them, they're felt experiences. The first one comes from working at a startup, dealing with systems, complex stuff. They described this strong necessity to get something out of me, and the intensity was so extreme to the obscene, their words. Imagine feeling that.
Wow, obscene.
Right. They felt literally like if someone took over my hand and just pulled me towards a paper and a pen and I just had to draw out the sister I had envisioned in my mind. They knew it was clearly more efficient and they just knew I had to place it out of my mind.
Yeah.
It's such a striking image, like being compelled by an external force almost.
Yeah.
A physical demand for release, not just a good idea.
That image, being pulled, it says something profound, doesn't it, about where this necessity comes from, how intense it is. It suggests it's not always a conscious choice, like, okay, time to create. It's almost autonomous, something that demands completion, whether you consciously will it or not in that moment.
Yeah, like the idea itself wants out.
Exactly. Using the person as its vehicle, its conduit. It goes beyond just problem solving or artistry. It feels more like instinct. That dread of not doing it, plus the feeling of being pulled, it really paints a picture of a force that's raw, almost primal, bringing form to the formless.
That distinction, conscious versus involuntary pull, is really interesting. And then they give a second example, maybe more relatable day to day. It's this very series of recordings, the Rhizome Times podcast, what you're listening to now. They explain that, the initial reason for the walks was practical, getting the dog used to being alone. But they took it as an opportunity to be able to let out my thoughts. So a mundane routine becomes a channel for that deeper creative need, materializing thoughts.
And these two examples, they seem different on the surface, right? Drawing a system versus talking into a mic. But they perfectly illustrate different kinds of materialization, both driven by that same necessity.
One visual, one verbal.
Yeah. First, materializing a visual, functional concept onto paper. Tangible output. Second, materializing abstract thoughts, complex ideas, through spoken words, making internal reflections audible, shareable. In both cases, the person feels compelled to externalize what's inside, a diagram, a philosophical point, whatever. It just shows how versatile that creative impulse is. It doesn't care about medium or art form.
Mhm.
It uses whatever's available, whatever channel opens up. It's that basic drive, unseen to seen, mind needing to offload into reality.
Okay, now brace yourself, because here's where the speaker really takes a leap. It gets fascinating and, yeah, provocative. They introduce their core hypothesis, and they know it's provocative, they say so. They propose that the act of creation is, quote, driven a lot by this biological libidinal forces. And they are very direct about it. They say, and I'm quoting directly here, I hope my audience here is, mature enough to follow or to, I guess, laugh with me about it. But we're talking about semen, right? Coming. Women and men both. We both come, right? So that's really, we both ejaculate, right?
Whoa, okay, yeah. That's direct. And that is the central, bold, quite radical argument they build. It definitely needs careful unpacking. So the speaker suggests that the process of ejaculation is one of fantasy, at least a one, in this case, materialize on. That phrasing may be a bit awkward, but it's the absolute foundation of their whole theory. What they're really suggesting is a direct fundamental parallel, a parallel between that intensely personal biological act of sexual release, which is often, driven by or connected to internal fantasy, and the act of bringing any creative idea into existence. They're arguing the mechanism isn't just similar. They think it's the same mechanism.
The same mechanism. That's a huge claim.
It is. And to be clear, when they talk about biological libidinal forces and ejaculation as fantasy materialized, they probably don't mean a literal plumbing connection between, say, sex organs and writing a book. It's more conceptual, a mechanistic link at a deeper primal level. Think about libido in psychology, like Freud used it, not just sex drive, but overall psychic energy, instinctual drives that can be channeled or sublimated into other things like creativity.
Ah, sublimation.
Right. But the speaker takes it a step further, maybe a much more literal biological step. Their audacious claim is that the biological act of ejaculation, the physical materialization of sexual fantasy, that specific act serves as the archetypal biological blueprint. The model mechanism for all forms of materializing any internal fantasy. They actually say, I don't think I know it, is this mechanism which drives this mechanisms of creation.
I don't think I know. So asserting it strongly.
Very strongly. It implies that the deep biological drive to, let's say, externalize sexual fantasy physically is fundamentally the same imperative driving us to externalize creative fantasies, whether that's designing a system, making this podcast, painting a masterpiece. It's presented as one unified fundamental biological urge. It suggests creating isn't just some high-level cognitive thing we do. It's primal, instinctual. It challenges us, right? Where our greatest achievements just another way of materializing an internal fantasy.
And just to make sure we really get the weight of this comparison, this controversial link, they spell it out again, almost like a challenge. They ask, how do we materialize our sexual fantasies? We ejaculate. How do we materialize our creative fantasies? Well, that's really our question. It's this stark, provocative juxtaposition, forcing us to look at these two acts through one single biological lens, very bold framing.
And building right on that, they push into the biological, even evolutionary implications. They emphasize this creative, materializing drive is so ingrained in us biologically that it is the same mechanism which allows for procreation, which allows for the multiplicity of humans, which allows for us to continue and spread.
Okay, so linking creativity directly to survival and spreading the species.
It's exactly. It expands materialization beyond just one person's art or invention. It connects it to the very survival, the expansion, the propagation of our species. In this view, creating isn't just self-expression. It's fundamentally linked to the drive to procreate, to proliferate. It suggests this unified biological imperative not just to exist, but to manifest, to expand. It's like the force of life itself pushing outwards, propagating itself whether through babies or through ideas and technologies that let the species spread physically or, conceptually.
Wow. Okay. Now, if you thought that was a leap, hold on, because the speaker acknowledges this next part is straight up speculation, but it takes the whole idea, cosmic. They ask, we're so close to not only being here, but elsewhere. The real questions become, what are those forms of colonization that happened before us, right? Are maybe just a result of that, right?
Yeah, this is definitely out there, pure speculation, no empirical grounding here. But it elevates that whole concept, fantasy materialization, to this grand, almost universal scale. If that drive to materialize, to expand, is so deep, so tied to biology and procreation, what does that say about the universe itself, about existence?
Right. is this drive uniquely human, or is it fundamental to
To even
us?
consciousness. So
Yeah.
speakers wondering if this urge to expand, to colonize new lands, new planets, new realms of thought is maybe not just us, but a basic feature of life, maybe existence itself. It opens up huge philosophical questions. Is the universe itself an act of materialization? Are we, with this drive to create and spread, just a continuation of some earlier primordial colonization or materialization of it? It's the ultimate, how far can a fantasy go question, right? Beyond our personal stuff to the fabric of reality, the potential for life's drive to just spread everywhere.
It definitely gives you something to chew on there, cosmic implications. But, okay, to bring this huge, slightly wild theory back down to Earth, maybe, the speaker picks a real-world example, a test case, and it's someone known for materializing massive fantasies, though also, as they say, a very controversial character, Elon Musk. The choice feels deliberate, right? Musk embodies that relentless drive.
He certainly does seem to fit the profile they're building.
And the first point the speaker makes about Musk, undeniably direct, connects right back to the biological theory. They say bluntly, he has a ton of kids, direct quote, serves a specific purpose in their argument.
Yeah, however crude that sounds, the speaker presents it as a direct, unmistakable manifestation of that mechanism of sexual fantasy they talked about. According to their theory, Musk having many children isn't just a personal choice. It's seen as a concrete biological expression of that fundamental drive.
The drive for procreation, materializing sexual fantasy, achieving multiplicity.
Exactly. It's presented as a tangible, living link back to the biological root of their hypothesis.
Yeah.
It suggests that basic procreative urge is core to how someone materializes their internal biological fantasies into the physical world, a literal genetic manifestation.
Okay. And the second point about Musk, his fantasies are massive.
Right.
They specifically point to his desire to take humanity into space. So you have the biological procreation on one side and this huge, almost sci-fi level of creative technological materialization on the other. The speaker sees them as linked.
This is where the theory really shows its breadth and its audacity, really.
Yeah.
Musk's ambitions as a SpaceX, Starlink, trying to get humanity to Mars that functions as the parallel materialization. A grand creative technological fantasy made real, or trying to be made real.
Building rockets instead of, well,
in addition to, according to the speaker's first point, but yeah, according to their model, it operates through the exact same underlying mechanism as the biological procreation. Whether it's expanding human life on Earth via kids or expanding humanity's reach into space, both are framed as expressions of this one powerful drive.
to materialize internal visions, internal desires.
Precisely. So for the speaker, Musk becomes this ultimate modern example, a figure driven by this overwhelming dual necessity, materializing biological procreative fantasies and these grand technological, almost colonizing fantasies. It really highlights how the theory applies across totally different scales, right?
Yeah.
From the deeply personal and biological to the universally ambitious, maybe even existential. It kind of pushes you to think, are all our big projects, our explorations, just a more complex version of that primal drive to spread and proliferate?
Wow. Okay. What a journey this deep dive has been, seriously. We started with those quiet morning thoughts, that initial reflective moment, took that detour into Opera the Commendator scene, which, looking back, really did subtly set the stage, didn't it?
It really did, the theme of materialization.
Yeah. Then we explored those really personal stories about the necessity to create, feeling physically pulled to draw a system, using a dog walk to get thoughts out, and then bam, head first into that bold biological theory, linking our deepest urges, procreation and creation, through one shared mechanism, and wrapping it up with Elon Musk, a figure who, like it or not, definitely materializes fantasies on a massive, multifaceted scale.
And that loops us right back around to you listening right now on the Rise Up Times podcast. Because the speaker in that original recording ends with a really direct question. It resonates with everything we've just talked about. They ask, how are you currently materializing your fantasies?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. It's an invitation to look inward, to think about your own urges to create, to manifest things, to maybe recognize that feeling of necessity, however it shows up for you. Is it in your job, your hobbies, your relationships, how you plan your future? This theory, bold as it is, challenges us to see a deep, maybe primal connection in all these acts of bringing something new into being, from a simple sketch to a huge life goal.
So the final thought to leave you with: if our deepest creative urges really are tied to these fundamental biological drives like the speaker proposed,
Right.
what does that imply about us? about the human condition, our collective future.
Right. Are we just sort of bound by this inherent need to constantly materialize, to expand, to create, big and small?
And if that's true, what does that mean for ideas like free will, or the purpose of it all? It's definitely something to mull over long after this deep dive finishes. Thank you truly for joining us on this deep dive into the unseen drive to create, right here on the Rhizome Times podcast. If you found this exploration as thought-provoking, as fascinating as we did, we'd love it if you subscribed. You can find us on our YouTube channel and on Substack for more discussions like this, more original thinking.
Yep, the links for both YouTube and Substack are right there in the show notes. Easy to find.
And hey, if this deep dive gave you something valuable, please do hit that like button or heart it wherever you're listening, and maybe share it with a friend who might find it interesting too. It really helps us out.
It does indeed.
We look forward to diving deep with you again very soon.